Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to SCHIZO FM. How's it going, Raymond?
Very, very good. How are you?
I'm all right, yeah. Today I thought that we'd do a deep dive on ESG. I've got some interesting reading I've done on that. And I also want to talk about the UK emergency alert thing, because I think you might have an interesting perspective on that. But
yeah,
I don't know. You said you had a way to bring us in.
Yeah, I have a prop.
Okay.
It's my T-shirt.
Oh, wow. Okay.
A friend gave me this as a birthday present. Like,
What is it? Does it say Nietzsche
it says
above?
Nietzsche on it.
That's kind of awesome.
It's so obscene.
Yeah, it looks like a band shirt.
Yeah, it looks like a metal band shirt. Yeah.
Okay, that's pretty cool.
A friend gave it to me as a present like a year ago, and then I was looking for a T-shirt earlier, and I saw it, and I was like, I'm gonna wear that because the podcast is today. So
I don't know how many we're going to get today, to be honest with you.
Well,
I'm so worried. This stuff is interesting to me, but I feel like it's potentially like a really, really dry topic in a lot of ways. But
I watched one video of a guy explaining it to me, and then I watched another video.
That might actually be the one I have that I want to roast. I don't know.
But I watched another video, and they had both of them. It almost felt like they were talking about two different topics. So I feel like it probably would be good to like define it before we have a proper conversation. But you wanted to talk about the what's this security text alert system in the UK?
Sure.
Right, first,
because so this is something that supposedly happened on Sunday here, and I don't know. I was on the train at the time, and I don't know what it was about it, but I completely forgot it was happening at 3:00, and it came and went, and I didn't hear anything. My phone didn't go off. I've been seeing lots of stuff on like Telegram and Twitter and stuff, like the general like more conspiracy loon end saying to go into your like settings and turn all that stuff off. And it will be too late after Sunday to do anything about it. I don't understand that really, but I just thought it was an interesting subject. So just to show what it would actually sound like and look like if it did happen. I have no idea why. I was on a train full of people and it didn't go off on anyone's phones. I heard that for a lot of people it didn't work, like specifically people on 3 network it didn't work for. But let me just load this up because I have a clip here. I nicked it from from Reddit of all places, and it's basically inside Westfield. You know Westfield, right?
Is that a shopping center?
Yeah, Westfield's like a big shopping center in London. So this is when the alert goes off inside of Westfield.
People are, yeah. There we go.
Oh my god!
It's very
weird.
This is important as well. So it's very like dystopian at least.
Yeah.
So the aesthetics are on point. But one thing interesting is you notice his watch there was 2:29. So they set it off early for some reason. I'm not sure why. And apparently it like sends out the signal for 20 minutes. And the ways to get around it are if your phone is turned off, is in airplane mode for the full 20 minutes, or you have the setting specifically turned off where it won't send the alert basically. But it's weird though, because so apparently this went into like early testing in 2014. So take that. I've seen some stuff connecting Rishi Sunak's wife like monetarily to the companies that did this, but I feel like it started too early for it to be an actual connection, but I don't know. But you might remember that during COVID there were text messages that went out to every like UK phone number.
Yeah, like one of the weirdest things I've ever experienced in my life was when I went from the UK to Ireland, and then after like 5 days I was supposed to do quarantine, and after 5 days I got a phone call and they were like, "Are you still quarantining?"
Really?
Like, basically, yeah. And I was like, but they were concealing it as if they were like, "Oh, we're just checking in to see if everything's okay." It was like, yeah, they were concealing it to make it seem kind of Like,
Right. I suppose it might cause like or it might have caused like a big scandal if they were like intimidating people, perhaps.
yeah, exactly. But it was just, I remember because I was going for a run at the time, and I was just like, "Who the fuck's ringing me?" And I rang it. I was like, "This is crazy," you know, because it felt like, oh, I'm like, have I gone past the 2 mile rule or something accidentally? You know? Yeah, that was one of the most dystopian things I've ever experienced in my life. So
That's weird. So did you fill out one of the forms? Is that how they got your number?
yeah. When you come in the country, you have to fill out a form, and you have to give like the residence of where you were staying, all the all the details and stuff. So yeah,
I did that for a few things, but I never got a phone call. That is very
it
creepy.
was weird.
But yeah, I don't know. So this is the actual government's like video on there.
You won't always be aware of dangers as they happen. That's why there's now a way to warn you when there's a danger to your life, health, or property in the area you're located. An emergency alert sends an urgent and distinctive siren-like sound to your mobile phone. It looks like this and sounds like this.
It's the very like the soft voice, the cartoons, and the nice jingly background music. It's very. I find it. I know. I will talk about specifically about what actually worries people about this stuff, but I find it just aesthetically very disconcerting.
Yeah, because like they're almost trying to say to you, it's okay. This is normal. Do not worry about
help
this.
you.
It's for you. We're trying to help you. We're trying to help you.
Yeah, it's very strange.
Appearing on your screen until you acknowledge it. If you receive an
So that's interesting as well. So until you acknowledge it, so that siren's just going to keep going off until you press yes, I'm here.
It's like attention economy phone, you know. It's like, look at me now.
Man.
emergency alert, you should stop what you're doing. Read the alert if it's safe to do so, and do what it says. Emergency
alerts. That's a good point. I didn't think about that. Like, what about all the people who are driving?
Yeah. What about all the people that are caught in those infamous British wildfires? You know, I don't have time to look at my phone.
This is another thing. It's like the reasons for this are like, okay, when would I think it would be justified? I think it would be justified in like the case of like a nuclear strike or something's about to.
Yeah.
If there's maybe extreme weather like a hurricane or a tornado or something, but
like when do you get that in like
you don't get it.
You know what I mean? Like I'd understand this if you were like living in like the Australian bush during wildfire like season or something, but this is like, you know, it's like climate, like they're trying to turn the climate emergency. I feel like they really kind of exhausted the pandemic, and like straight away they were like, okay, how can we make climate change into like the next way to like fear monger people? Like, you know, oh, we're gonna have text messages in case there's a wildfire in your area, and it's kind of absurd because like when has there ever been a wildfire in the UK? Like one time, like, you know.
Another thing that they were thinking of using it for, or they will use it for, are terror alerts as well. Like, you know, within the range of a phone mast, we'll get the alert. But then I also feel like you're letting the terrorists know that, that they've been caught. I don't know. Like, it seems weird to me.
The whole thing seems weird to me.
Yeah, I don't know.
They will only ever be sent by the emergency services or the government. They send the same message to all compatible phones within an area of risk, so they don't use your phone number, collect data, or track your movements. You don't need to register or download an app, and they're completely free to receive.
Yeah, doesn't matter what type of phone you have or which one of these demographics you are.
You will be tracked.
Yeah, well, we already know they can track. If they have your number, they can track like what phone mast you're closest to.
Do you know what it reminds me of a little bit too? Have you seen Jurassic Park? Like the newer ones, the ones with Chris Pratt in them.
I haven't. I've deliberately not seen the newer ones.
So well, I think one of them is decent, but like they go like it reminds me of Jurassic Park because it's like they're trying to make it really nice and calm and like touristy, and obviously you can imagine if you were going to go to Jurassic Park, if it was a real thing, you probably have to have a lot of money, right? And people like they're like safaris. You're like very expensive, so they're trying to like lure people in with the illusion of security and safety the whole time. But they're like, do not put your hand out of the vehicle, or your alert system will go off, and a pterodactyl will rip it off. It's like this like weird mix of like trying to calm people, but at the same time like trying to be like calmly responding to things which are like surrounding them the whole time, which are going to tear them apart, like fucking tornadoes and terrorism and stuff. You know, it's very theme parky, like danger theme parky.
Yeah, I feel like this sort of stuff makes it seem like we live in a more dangerous world than we actually do. If that makes sense as well.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of the biggest thing. I really don't know if there's anything else
in the UK.
actually interesting here, to be honest. But I'm usually on like the conspiracy loon wagon for this sort of stuff, that this is all like a big plan and the emergency alerts are going to control us and stuff. But I guess the biggest argument I've heard for this, like against this stuff, is that it's just like government overreach. To have that sort of hand in people's technology and stuff. And I don't know, I feel like, we're all stupid enough to voluntarily have essentially like computer network nodes on our person turned on at all times, tracking us. And you can go into the settings and turn this stuff off. So I feel like I don't really agree with the conspiracy people on this one.
Yeah, like I'm less concerned with the conspiracy side to it, that they're tracking and collecting your data, than I am, even though I don't like that, but I'm less concerned with that than I am with the kind of emotional synchronization around panic that they're obsessed with. Because I think that's what this is really about. I think it's like synchronizing people into a state of perpetual panic, and like synchronizing people into like emergency response mechanisms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's that it has that kind of network effect as well. I think because especially when people people are getting more sucked into their phone screens, people are just becoming more trusting of technology, and I feel like a lot of this stuff is just outsource our thinking.
Yeah, like they're trying to say technology is here to keep you safe, and comfort you.
Yeah, and to replace any sort of like thought you would have to do in a dangerous situation, right? Like,
yeah. Have you? When I was in the text I wrote, I don't know if I've mentioned this to you before, but one of the essays in the notes from the pod text was about a shark attack.
I remember.
Yeah, and it reminds me of this because people were filming it, and it's kind of like the technology is being used as a shield against like nature or something. It's like tornadoes, wildfires, like ridiculous, like wildfires in the UK. But it symbolizes the kind of like elemental potential or something, like fire, cold, like these sort of external intrusions and threats, which are constantly, I suppose, just in life in general, or even kind of primordial threats. We're constantly putting up these kind of virtualized screens in front of ourselves to like shield us from them. I think that's another way you can kind of look at this thing.
Do you think there might be an emergency alert for a shark attack at some point?
In the UK, probably. I mean, like there'll probably be emergency alerts for like pterodactyl attacks soon. Which of this is a dinosaur? It's not really. That's for like alien invasions or something. Like there was a whole UFO thing recently in the mainstream media, wasn't there? In the United States, they were talking about UFOs, and different politicians were kind of acknowledging subtly that UFOs were a real thing.
Yeah, that's a big topic, but it's something that comes up every like couple of years, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. We're still yet to see the actual like alien corpse in the freezer. That's when I'll believe.
Well, like there's something again, like to refer to Paul Virilio, who's really good on this kind of stuff. He basically said that at some point in history, in modernity, I think he's talking more like the post-war era with like nuclear deterrence, and then terror deterrence, and then COVID deterrence, and then this states can only justify themselves anymore based off of security, like security mechanisms, security mechanisms, like the only justification. So in order to justify their power, they have to have like a never-ending list of kind of almost obscene threats that are going to get you. Okay, terrorism was a real thing. Like people were killed by it. Like I'm not going to pretend it wasn't. But there's a kind of exaggeration there. Then with COVID, it's like, well, how bad is this virus really? I mean, are you kind of fudging the numbers here with the death rates and so on? And then you get to like wildfires, UFOs, it slowly gets more and more obscene. And like they're running out of like the thing which is supposed to put us into a state of panic the whole time, because like it's like the only way they can govern us anymore is through security systems.
I just want to see the Jaws remake where they all get an emergency alert on their phones to warn them about the threat.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's kind of all I really had on the emergency alert stuff. I really don't agree with the conspiratorially minded bit on this one. I feel like I think the stuff you're saying is right about the security state and the fact that things are made to seem a lot more dangerous than they actually are. That's all true. But I mean, I don't feel like this is the way they're going to control people necessarily.
But do you not find it weird? Like, do you not find like, why are they doing this? Like, why are they spending so much money on this? And like, what's the end goal for them?
Well, I think people attribute a lot of intention where there isn't necessarily. I feel like the government has a lot of money to spend, and sometimes they just find things to spend it on. And I think the excuse is probably COVID and terror and that sort of stuff.
Well, what about from like an epistemic point of view? Like, like if we're being synchronized into constant threats, into like responding to constant threats, are we not losing our ability to actually respond to real threats or distinguish between real and non-real threats? Like I think that's the real negative side to this stuff.
Yeah, that would be my critique, is that number one, you're outsourcing people's thinking, critical thinking to their phones, basically, like what their phone's telling them. And then number two, you're outsourcing the critical thinking to the state as such, because like they said in the video, right, this is only ever going to be done by the emergency services and the state.
Yeah. And also I also think it's the kind of product of like a very disembodied population of people who kind of no longer explore the world or think about the world, confront the world, try conquer anything, or like get entangled with the world in any sort of significant sense anymore. Like everything is like, people will, especially if you're in a big city, people will Google Maps, where am I going, and they'll follow their phone. Like they won't even think about, do I go left, do I go right, do I remember the shop is beside this thing? They just kind of have this virtual kind of mediation constantly. That I suppose the next inevitable step with that would be to like to have security systems in place for everything. Yeah,
it's also solidifying the smartphone as the most important limb of the body, right, as well.
Yes, yeah. It's like a prosthetic limb, except for it's not like a functional limb. It's like a kind of thinking limb. It's a prosthetic brain, basically.
Yeah, right. And you can outsource all your thinking to this thing, yeah. Anyway, cool. I don't know if you had any other strong feelings about the UK alert system, but I thought it was an interesting thing that we should talk about because it happened this weekend. So,
yeah, I've just noticed that because I used a phone box a few weeks ago for the first time in years.
What? Wait, what? That's
I left my phone in someone's car, and then I needed to call them, so I ran down to the phone box and near me, and I used my card because you don't put money in them anymore. You use a card, and I saw underneath it was like press 2 for an emergency services hotline in case it was I don't know what it was for. Like it was very vague, and I thought that was also weird too. It reminded me of like in the tube in London where they say, if you see something, say something. And it's like,
yeah,
what the fuck are you talking about? See what? Like, be more specific here.
I didn't think they were still hooked up, if I'm honest with you.
Phone boxes.
Yeah, I don't know. I think a lot of them in at least mainland Britain are. Sorry, no, in the UK. Sorry, I hope that's right. They're like defibrillators now. They're not even phones.
Oh, really? Yeah. Well, we have them for some reason. I don't know why. We have loads of them in the city I'm in, and it's not a particularly big city, so it's like weird that there's so many. But I just noticed that like there's a kind of constant inference of emergency and communication. Like our communication tools are increasingly becoming emergency response tools, and also just the stuff on the tube, like the see it, say it, sort it, the kind of wonderfully vague kind of injunctions really piss me off, because I just think like, what are you talking about? Like, if you see something weird, say something. I think, well, I see weird shit every day. Like,
yeah, if I called them up every time I saw weird stuff on public transport, I'd be calling them a lot.
I know, yeah. Like, but which shows you that it's not really about like practical, like you've seen a grizzly bear over there, that's bad, you know, rings, like do something. It's not like this kind of like natural, like problem, solution, object, reaction kind of thinking. It's like vague, generalized, emotional, sentimental sort of dispositions.
Yeah,
that they're trying to install in us, you know.
I'm really getting stuck in a weird area here, but I feel like because obviously that stuff is overtly a reference to, I think it's a reference to terrorism originally. Like, oh, if you see a bag someone's ditched and it might be a bomb or something, then call us up. But it's interesting because I mean, at least on public transport in London today, you see a lot less of the, you know, poster with the you know, suspicious looking man and call this number and whatever. You see a lot more of the hate speech and sexual harassment stuff. I think but deliberately vague so that people will report all sorts of things, perhaps.
But have you noticed they kind of fuse the two together, though? They sort of say, you know, they sort of like hate speech becomes a security issue rather than it just being a completely different social issue. It's like, well, we don't deal with that within the kind of security infrastructure because it's not a physical risk. It's a social problem, let's say. So, you know, we deal with, like, it's kind of fused together, which is quite pernicious to me, actually. And also, I remember a few years ago, this was like the height of the Me Too kind of era stuff. There was like certain pubs, I don't know if it was in the UK, if it was in America, but certain pubs had like the system where, like, if a girl felt she was in danger, she could walk up to the bar and say like code word blue or something. I don't know what it was.
They still have that. And I don't know. I feel like that's a positive thing.
No, I feel it's a terrible thing because it's just creating this like security subject. It's like, I'm in danger. It's like, well, if you're in danger, you know what I mean? Like, it's like the Stasi or something. It's like, and also it's like, what if she's just having a shit date? You know what I mean? She goes, says cold blue, and then I don't know. Like, people can misuse this stuff.
That's true. That's the concern. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I'm not as worried about that stuff. But
fair enough. I'm only kind of into this because of Paul Virilio, because Paul Virilio is just very.
Yeah, I haven't read him, unfortunately, so maybe I need to.
If you read him, you'll be convinced that this stuff is much more pernicious than, and not pernicious in a conspiratorial way, but just in the sense of like what's happening to modern civilization with their communication technologies and with their constant use of panic as like a kind of a disposition, as a kind of governing disposition. Nearly, if you read Paul Virilio, you'll see this stuff with a slightly more sinister light. That's all I'll say.
Cool. All right. So what we are actually going to do a deep dive on today is ESG. So this is like we were talking about this before we started. And so ESG stands for environmental, social, and corporate governance. Now, you were saying that it seems really vague, and it kind of is, but I did some digging and I managed to get some substantive stuff. Okay. So it's basically a framework for assessing companies on their environmental impact, their social impact, and there's some legal stuff in the corporate governance stuff as well. And basically I'm just giving the description of what it does, what someone who's advocating for it would say it does. It's a way so that stakeholders in the business. Now this comes back to our Great Reset stuff a little bit. So I'll circle back round on what my theory of this is. it's all about stakeholder interest. And what this ESG rating is supposed to do is it's supposed to say how well companies score on those criteria, on the environmental, the social, and the corporate governance, the legal stuff. And so it's strange messaging, because in some ways it's trying to say that, a company with a high rating is going to be, very environmentally friendly, very like socially positive, whatever that means. We'll get back to that. And they just behave well politically or legally. But it's dressed up as if it's a metric for a good company to invest in. And so that's all to do with institutional investors, but we'll come back to that stuff. So I'm just going to read what the connection I think is between. So if you remember from the Great Reset stuff, we were talking about stakeholder capitalism.
Yeah.
I think there is a connection in the language used, because if I just read from the Wikipedia, so ESG is a framework designed to be embedded into an organization's strategy that considers the needs and ways in which to generate value for all organizational stakeholders. That really sounds like the Klaus Schwab stuff we were looking at. So this is not just investors and stuff. This is employees, customers, suppliers, and financiers. So that's would be investors, basically. So ESG corporate reporting can be used by stakeholders to assess the material sustainability related risks and opportunities relevant to an organization. So I think it definitely sounds a lot like the stakeholder capitalism that the Great Reset people were talking about, which I find very interesting, because companies that are big on the stakeholder capitalism stuff, such as, I don't know, I shouldn't name any names actually just yet. They seem very big on the ESG scoring. But what I find very conflicted is that, it's a reporting that's supposed to assess them like material sustainability related risks. And what I think it confuses is that, a good investment monetarily might not necessarily be a good investment for the environment or social causes. In fact, I think they probably deviate quite a lot. So that's how I would summarize it as simply as possible. I don't know what your initial thoughts on that are.
Yeah, like I don't 100% understand the mechanisms of it and like the structural mechanisms of it. It seems a little bit to me like a social credit score for companies.
Yeah,
like the Chinese social credit score, but for companies. And like on the surface level, I kind of think, well, is that kind of maybe good, because like I'm not like I don't think companies should be treated like citizens. I don't think they should have the same rights as citizens and treated like they're so on that level. I'm kind of like initially like, okay, whatever. But then I start to get a bit more suspicious about it, because then I think like, well, is it a way of punishing certain companies, like outside of the market mechanism? So like if you're a company, so take what's going on with Fox News, for example, because they got Tucker Carlson's being removed from Fox. I could imagine a situation where there was like a punishment of Fox as a company by an ESG association, and in which it's a bit like cancel culture for companies in the sense of like maybe you can't get access to this market, or that you can't get investing or funding from this bank or something if you don't meet certain kind of ideological criteria. So that would be my sort of like red flag with it.
Yeah, I think that's all generally right. So I will get into like the substantive stuff about, because it's strange, because the way they're actually scored is it's kind of a decentralized system in a way. Like there's different ways of getting the score for companies. So but yeah, just to kind of go through the categories, like something obviously there. So one thing I've noticed about this is it's incredibly heavy on that first part of the acronym, the environmental stuff. It is everything I've looked at. It is so incredibly heavy on the environmental stuff. Like that seems to be the highest weight. Now, what I've seen a lot of whinging about, basically, and this is from the normal, unfortunately, I would say hacks. So I think Jordan Peterson's been talking about this a lot. He keeps coming up on this show, and I'm not sure why. He's been talking about this a lot in terms of the S part, the social stuff. And
Some of his interviews, though, to give him credit, are actually quite good.
Oh no, I was quite a big fan of him at one point. I just feel like this shtick's getting old, you know. Fair,
but like he has on someone to do ESG. I didn't watch it, but he's had people like with detransitioners and like all this kind of stuff. Just as a side note, like he's a weirdly good interviewer, but when he starts, but I don't want to go on a rant about him, but yeah.
There's this also, I managed to catch some of this guy called Adam Curry on Joe Rogan as well. So I just kind of went into the to kind of see what people would normally absorb. So when they talk about this ESG stuff, they bring up the social aspect a lot, and they sort of point the finger at, woke advertising. So that's like stuff with Pride Month, and then like affirmative action, hiring policies and stuff. Now, I will get on to this specifically, like what I like the substantive part of how these are scored, but those I've not seen much of that, if any, scoring stuff based on that. It's almost entirely on the environmental side of stuff. It might be the sectors I've looked at, but we will get around to that, the actual details. But
well, that would show you, and that will kind of fit into the whole emergency text thing. That there's a kind of general Geist shift, maybe away from social progressive criteria as a kind of marker of loyalty and conformity to the regime into your environmental status.
Yeah.
That's what I would predict in the next 5 years, if I was going to predict something.
Yeah. So like, in decades past, there's been similar systems. So one is corporate social responsibility, and one is EHS, which is environment, health, and safety. So those are kind of like a couple of decades old version of this, but they were mostly revolving around like philanthropic, like, so a company would, donate money and then they would get good scores in those. Basically, they're more like ethical and legal frameworks. This new ESG thing seems to be like more environmentally focused, and this is one of the issues you'll see with this, is that it's like, well, who decides what's environmentally friendly? And so that you have this one thing, just to bring up as a good example, is the whole idea of carbon neutral. And so a company that does things that are really bad for the environment, like zinc mining, like Tesla would do, right? Or as long as they sort of tip the balance on their carbon stuff or their environmental pressures, like they pay to have some trees planted or something like that, then they can get a good score.
So like, what would be what would you do to get a bad score? Like get oil from the wrong country, or
I'll get into a specific example of that, because I don't want to speak in general terms about that, because I have some very specific examples. But I mean, just to wrap up the kind of general stuff, and again, this is just to make the point clear that I think that the main issue with this is that, okay, well, who's doing the measuring of these things, So this is just an overview video.
E stands for environmental, social, and governance. You can think of it as an analysis framework to help measure and quantify the degree to which an organization is operating in a sustainable manner. Environmental assessment criteria help stakeholders understand an organization's impact on the environment and the climate, like its greenhouse gas emissions, and its management team's stewardship over natural resources, like fresh water. While understanding environmental risk and impact is a big part of the ESG framework, the concept of sustainability
is not just a big part, it's the main part, I would argue.
In this context, extends well beyond just the environment. The S pillar, social, examines an organization's social impact. It seeks to understand how well leadership manages relationships with stakeholders, including fair wages for workers, generating positive outcomes in the communities where they operate.
Yeah, so just to go back to one of the points I was trying to make, is that despite, this is such bullshit, but they're called like the right, like, Jordan Peterson, those sorts of people critiquing this and saying that, oh, it's all about how woke a company is. But from what I've seen, it's really not. It's about like fair pay and the more traditional like left-wing things, to be honest with you.
Well, but like, why would big mega companies give a crap about that?
I'm not sure.
I'm not convinced they do.
I don't think they do either, but this might be a way to try and get them to care about those things.
Yeah, but like the question is, what do they really care about?
Well, this is also the thing, is that this is why I think this is my main issue with this stuff, is that, okay, we can all say, okay, this is like good for the environment, environmentally friendly, or this is like more fair, like equitable wages or something like that. But then you get into the details and you see the effects that those things have. Like loads of ideas seem good, like, okay, let's pay everyone a fair wage, but then you realize that, to do that, you have to print money and it brings down purchasing power, for example.
Yeah, but I don't think these corporations are doing something that they think is good for workers, but then it happens to be bad for the economy in some general sense. I think they're just bullshitting. Like, they don't give a crap about giving workers better pay.
Yeah, I agree.
That's just a rhetorical ploy to get you to accept whatever they're planning, or to like make you think that you're going to have some sort of, like, if you're an ordinary person, you're going to have some sort of more political power within this system, and then it turns out it's got nothing to do with you. It's probably to do, if you're talking about like environmental stuff, to do with where you get oil from. It's probably got something to do with punishing companies from getting, or punishing nations for getting oil from Russia.
Yes, but basically, yes, you're not wrong about any of that. And yeah, no, this kind of goes on and on. It's pretty dull, but I just wanted to make the point that, and again, this is like a veneer on top of this stuff. Like, you're making the right points, because this is all a veneer on top of it. To like, this is all the bullshit, basically.
Yeah.
So anyway, I wanted to talk about. Yeah, so one thing that I thought was quite interesting as well is that the UN is pushing for an overlap between the ESG stuff and the kind of sustainable development goals. So that's their kind of like, crisis goals for 2030, if you've ever seen them.
Yeah.
So they've got a big overlap with this stuff. So I don't know, I just kind of wanted to go through one of the videos from the UN on their, it's like their red alert thing, basically. So I wanted to go through that video. Oh, it's the alert system.
This is very thematic of what, the one earlier.
So it seems like a bit of a weird term for me to bring this UN stuff up, but I feel like it's all connected in some way.
Yeah, 100%. Like, this is connecting all of it. But I think the whole climate thing and environmental thing is intrinsically connected with kind of these security alert systems and on these sorts of wartime. It's kind of like wartime preparation a little bit. You kind of get that, like,
yeah, that's it.
That sounds like a wartime siren in like World War II. Like, the Germans are here, get inside.
That actually is. That's what it is, right? It's an air raid siren. So that actually, just to kind of bring us back to what we're dealing with right now contemporarily, like, a lot of the news seems like we're gearing up for some sort of war footing. Either with a limited war with, a more direct war with Russia, or something a bit larger with China. But it feels like even if they can't make that happen, they're going to make the war footing for the environment, like the environment stuff.
Yeah, like, I'm sure the environment stuff has other, like, if you can get a bunch of companies on board for making maybe a cheap profit or good public relations in some way, and they get on board. So it's like, well, if the wars happen, then, or if the wars don't happen, look, it's good for these corporations, so who cares? But then if they do happen, they're kind of instilling some sort of wartime preparation mechanisms, because they do have to think about, like, okay, how do we sustain certain standards of living in the West if we can't get any like stuff from China, we can't get any fuel from Russia, and so forth,
Mm-hmm.
Eight years left to end poverty and hunger.
And the bees are dying. Remember, the bees are dying.
The bees are dying, yeah. The bees have been dying for 100 years.
Global emissions.
Well, good song choice, though.
It didn't start out as planned. We're not moving in the right direction. Years of progress lost in the pandemic. Escalating conflicts.
Wait. So years of progress lost in the pandemic. Do they not think it was like a great leap forward for them, the Great Reset?
Yeah, and like I thought the whole idea was like, oh, look at these marvelous technologies that we've whipped out with the vaccines, and like, this is such this is kind of like going to the moon kind of shit, you know?
Yeah, it was like, oh look, we can stay indoors and save energy and stuff like that.
Yeah, they've really turned that around, haven't they?
I also just realized, yeah, that Great Leap Forward and the Great Reset I never saw that connection before between like.
Yeah.
You know, like the Chinese communists, Great Leap Forward, Great Reset. Sounds very similar.
Oh yeah! Oh my god! Yeah, sorry, I forgot that was a Chinese communist.
No, it wasn't an obvious reference, but it's something that just clicked in my head. Yeah.
No, that's a good connection. Yeah, 100%. Except for like, I feel like the Great Leap Forward wasn't that quite. That was quite like harsh on old people, wasn't it? Like they were like throwing old people off bridges and stuff.
I mean, yeah, I think it was pretty harsh on anyone who wasn't seen as I mean, most people were seen as counter-revolutionary, right?
But like, I feel like our one is like the other way around. It's like, you know, children are stuck out of school for 2 years, and you got a bunch of old people buying up properties and stuff. Yeah. Well, anyway.
Someone's kitchen is on fire here, and that's part of the problem somehow. I don't know.
Yeah. It's in
climate breakdown.
Russia as well.
Yeah, that was a good point actually, because I saw
years of progress lost in the pandemic.
That's London, right?
Yeah.
Escalating conflicts.
That looks like somewhere in the east of Europe because of
look at
the writing looks like Cyrillic.
Yeah.
On the right hand side.
You can see the language there in the right, yeah.
Oh, I didn't. Yeah, that's what I meant, yeah.
Yeah.
Climate breakdown. So where are we now? For decades, we successfully fought poverty. Now it's on the rise again. 1 out of 10 suffer from hunger. More people than ever forced out of their homes.
They say we fought poverty. You know, like it's all war footing stuff, as you were saying. Like it's you know, we fought poverty, not we developed out of poverty or something, you know?
Yeah, I feel like, yeah, it was less of a war and more of just like a benign thing. And also, well, actually, I wouldn't even say it was benign. I think it was like, it actually benefited large corporations to have people brought out of poverty.
Yeah, because I mean, the poverty of a peasant was kind of relative. It was kind of like, well, I have a bit of land, I have a family. It's like, you know, and you're going to kick me out of this land and put me into a big warehouse and then be like, I'm bringing you out of poverty. So yeah, it is relative. But like, just the way they're kind of using this pre-war language in order to talk about like issues with development and environment and so on.
Yeah. Something you just said there, this is so off topic, but I've been thinking about this a lot recently. Like, I honestly, I feel like a lot of people would be a lot happier if they were just like peasants.
Oh yeah, totally. I probably would too.
Like without any of this bullshit. Like, yeah. but like, you know, like if I was teleported back there now and made a peasant, I would probably be quite happy because, you know, you've got like you would compare all the time. You'd be like, oh man, I got no technology and it's all really shit.
Yeah.
But I feel like if you never knew, you didn't know any better, I feel like you might be a lot happier.
Yeah. I mean, if you weren't constantly bombarded with, and also you'd be in a community of other peasants, so you'd be comparing yourself to them. You know, you wouldn't be comparing yourself the whole time to like celebrities and you know, very wealthy people driving past you in their new Mercedes or something. So yeah, totally. But there's like I can't remember what I was going to say. Never mind. Keep going.
Okay.
Forgotten.
Climate disasters increasing. Droughts alone estimated to displace 700 million people by 2030. This year, CO2 emissions hit a new record. At this rate, annual emissions will be 14% higher in 2030. Meanwhile, fossil energy receives $700 billion in subsidies from governments.
Your government.
Safe water and sanitation not made accessible fast enough. Progress must quadruple to cover all people by 2030. Women are held back at all levels. At this pace...
Well, one thing I think really interesting about this stuff is that, you know, in 2015, they obviously set the date 2030, right? Like arbitrarily.
Yeah.
And I don't know, maybe this is like, to bring more parallels, like that's 3 sets of 5 years. Like it seems a bit too much like top-down 5-year plan to me.
Yeah, I like
4 times as much water or something, and it just feels very like planned.
It's really, yeah, it's very technocratic. It's very like, here we have this completely abstract calculation done, and we're gonna have to meet. It's very like the COVID lockdowns. It's like we have to meet these quotas of like COVID 0 or something, you know.
Yeah. And then, I mean, these things, like, to rewind to when people have been brought out of poverty in the past, it happens in a decentralized way, and it happens because of development and industry, you know, like it doesn't happen because like in a top-down way. It just doesn't, you can't just will this sort of stuff. There needs to be the like, accompanying technologies and development, like actual development that goes along with it.
Actually, yeah, this whole topic of development is interesting because like it's almost like this is like not the development you were talking about before, where it's kind of more decentralized and so on. But this is like crisis development. It's like we have to develop in this way, top down, or else we're all going to be extinct.
Yeah. I mean, times past there would be progress or there would be development, and it would be let's just move in this general direction for the good of humanity. And now it's like by this year we have to do this, or else we're all dead.
Yeah, and then we're all fine when it doesn't happen, and then you know they just set a new goal by 5 years later, and so on and so on.
Yeah, and it's weird because it's so frustrating because I wouldn't deny that we're abusing the planet or that there are people living in really crap conditions. It's just this whole self-righteous, and we're going to do like these things are going to be done at the cost of your average person. They're not going to be done at the cost of the technocrats.
Oh no, of course, yeah. The technocrats are just
that's my issue. That's my central issue with it, I think.
Yeah, like I think a lot of this stuff is the technocrats and the elites are just trying to ensure that their power and that their wealth will be safe throughout the crises that are going to come in the next few decade or so, which is probably going to be maybe some sort of geopolitical conflict with Russia or China, through maybe dwindling resources and so on, which is going to cause other sorts of problems. I really think they're just trying to hedge their funds,
maybe that's it.
It's Liechtenstein. It's like putting all your money in Liechtenstein.
Yeah, they're going to, all the really high ESG companies are going to have all the money hidden within them, like
yeah, exactly.
By 2030, 825 million children won't have secondary level education. Human rights, health, and equality all hurt in the wake of war and disaster. Disrupted economies, food and energy.
Did you see that clip? It was showing like people won't be educated, and then it showed like what looked like the Taliban.
Yeah.
So it's like you people occupied that country for 20 years, and as soon as you left, that they took back over because you didn't offer them anything. You didn't develop that country in any way, and it's just amazing how stuck in like this kind of like 90s liberal new world order mindset they are. They've gone from these people want democracy and freedom and equality to if these people don't develop in this way, which suits us, the world's going to end.
Well, another thing that in that specific example that people forget is that actually a lot of people who turn towards extreme Islam are actually very, very educated people.
Oh yeah, yeah. A lot of people who are educated in the West as well.
And that's something which, this whole plan of let's just educate everyone to the higher education, and then it's going to fix all of these problems. I don't know if that's the fix, because I feel like a lot of educated people are very bad people.
Well, see, that's the big contradiction today. It's because it's like, we have this, this highly credentialized elite who are clearly a bunch of idiots, and they're like, oh, well, children aren't going to school in these impoverished countries. It's like, you kept your own kids out of school for 2 years and made them do telelearning. Or they just played video games for 2 years or something, and they all have ADHD, and they're all like, half of them don't know what gender they are anymore. It's just amazing, the arrogance of these people thinking that they have any right to go around developing these countries towards anything.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Crisis and galloping costs of living damage global solidarity. Everything interconnected.
I have to bring this up again. Like, I don't know if it's just because it's the UN, but global solidarity, it just sounds so
stupid.
Let's just say left Hegelian. Okay.
Yeah, totally. It's so ridiculous. Like, it's these terms like global solidarity, like they mean nothing to me. I kind of hear them and I just think like, that's just like an empty rhetorical ploy at this point. I don't think these people even believe it.
Everyone intertwined.
I don't want to be intertwined with everyone. Leave me alone.
Yeah, what the hell? The imagery there is very interesting. The flock of birds all flying as one.
Yeah.
Very interesting imagery.
I don't know if everyone watching this should look up Peter Sloterdijk, the myth of the human family. That doesn't mean the families in like your parents and your siblings or whatever. It means the global whole, right? Global humanitarian family. And he says that like this is basically, what does he say? He compares the moment we're in with like the fall of Rome, in that certain sort of absurd Christian notions, which were kind of just excessively, compassionate and so on, led to the destruction of Rome, and that we're going through a kind of similar thing today. And he says that like we're constantly being bombarded with injunctions to be one big family. But what's actually happening is that people are feeling more and more claustrophobic. It's like social media, refugees. There's a kind of enclosure, and rhetoric like that, like we're all intertwined. This is supposed to be like a nice thing, And I hear,
I picture
get away from me.
This homogenous blob of humanity where everyone is the same, and that doesn't seem like a desirable thing to me. In times past, I would have said that's because I'm right wing, but I think it's because I'm a particularist, and particularism should be celebrated, in my opinion.
Yeah, and also I like conflict. I like challenge. You know what I mean? I like rivalry. I don't like this kind of mushy, sensitive holding hands. You know what I mean? Like I don't think all conflict and rivalry and challenge is like this horrific thing which is going to lead to destruction. Because I think that's another kind of undertone they have to this. It's like, oh no, we've got political rivals at home through populism. We've got geopolitical rivals in Russia and China. Oh no, this is like our squishy, homogenous, liberal holding hands world order is going away, and there's more of a sort of multipolar or a more kind of political antagonisms. This is disaster. The world is ending. I'm like, this isn't disaster. I mean, it's actually
people
better.
Disagree with you. Oh no.
Huh?
People disagree with you. Oh no.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Let's see if we can get through the rest of this.
Yeah. what a horrible ad.
Yeah, it's weird though, because
it's chaos.
These sorts of like parts of capitalism and parts of these sorts of technologies are the things that brought people out of poverty in the first place. Like these technologies were the things that accomplished that thing where they said, "Oh, we initially did so well, then COVID fucked it up." You know?
Yeah.
There's a contradiction there, I think.
Yeah, I also feel like just the whole theme of development is kind of at play here, because it's like developing towards what, and it's kind of got that end of history theme to it, where it's like, well, what's the end to this? We're not really sure anymore. People don't necessarily just want to like blindly embrace development in this kind of obscene way. I think that people are now seeing that there's negatives. The development is like is kind of more of a trade-off. There's positives, but there's also negatives, and you kind of have to think about that. Whereas I think that these technocrats are just like, it's, how could you not want to develop?
Yeah.
You stupid
from a philosophical angle, it implies its own eschatology. And especially in a world where you're devoid of any spiritual or religious eschatology, you have this eschatology of progress, where there is this place where we not only are, but we should be progressing towards, and this inevitable march of progress.
Yeah, totally.
I think that would make a pretty cool wallpaper, the produce thing with the meat behind it.
Oh God, I don't know. It's obscene. It's more obscene than my T-shirt.
Business as usual won't cut it. Even though we made progress before, going back to pre-pandemic ways is not enough. We need a new paradigm built on the pillars of our 17 goals.
Oh no, they have
Rethink
17.
conventions. Flip the orthodoxies. Governments, organizations, corporations, citizens of the world, snap out of it. It's time for...
Sorry, citizens, that's straight from the Communist Manifesto.
Citizens of the world. Yes,
Unite.
citizens of the world, unite. Except for this time, it's citizens of the world, snap out of it.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, it marks for the 21st century. They've updated it.
Citizens of the world, snap out of it. You stupid pleb.
bold climate action. To act for women and girls. For social justice and inclusion.
Like, what is
Scale up the transition to renewable energy. Create 85 million green jobs. Phase out fossil fuel subsidies and tax carbon. $2.8 trillion. Keep your promises. Support developing nations. Write off debts. Free up $1 trillion for climate resilience, people and communities. $500 billion for Africa to achieve universal energy access by 2030. Commit to a circular economy now. New, resilient...
What's a circular economy?
They can cut...
I don't know for sure, but I'm going to go ahead and assume that it means that everything is... like, there's no waste. Like, everything's recycled and goes back in.
Oh, yeah.
Which sounds right to me, but, I mean, it needs to... like, the only drive that's going to make that happen is there needs to be, like, a profit motive for that. There needs to be a motive to do it. I don't know if it's going to happen top down, because there's always going to be bad actors who would just throw plastic into the rivers.
Well, like, circular would also assume a sphere of, like, I suppose that would be like a more inclusive, like a more exclusive, because even though they were blabbing on about world harmony and all that, circular economy might also refer to like a region which only trades with each other, kind of like the EU.
Yeah, I guess, like a limited economy. I don't know.
Which I'm totally fine with. It's just interesting because obviously they're probably. I think most of this shit basically is like we can't really trade with China anymore, and we can't get.
We need to close the circle.
Yeah, I think that's basically what they're doing.
Okay, right.
Waste by
but I just hate their rhetoric. I hate everything about
Strengthen domestic financial institutions. Make insurance and banking accessible to everyone. Scale up the digital transformation to educate the 1.6 billion kids who missed school in the pandemic. Educate girls. including the 130 million not in school now. Ensure women's equal share of decision-making. Eliminate discrimination against female workers and boost productivity by 40%.
Have you ever seen
We cannot
the documentary Adam Curtis did? I can't remember which one it was, but they went to Afghanistan, and they were
I've seen that one. Yeah, it's good.
The scene where they have like a bunch of Afghan women, and they're educating them about the shamp with the toilet. You know, the art piece where you put a toilet in a room, and there's like it's like a famous clip, and you can probably find it if you just type it into YouTube, and like one of the women just like looks at the you know kind of like liberal kind of social worker type woman who's educating these Afghan women about contemporary art, and she just looks at her when she's explaining the toilet thing like what? You fucking people are conquering us, you know? And I think that's like a fantastic like little snippet of reality intruding into their weird hopes of liberal world harmony or whatever the hell.
Yeah, it's in hypernormalization somewhere.
If you have it, you should play it actually, because it's a nice foil to this kind of stuff.
Okay. I think I might have it here.
I can try search to see what the.
I found it. I just want to load it into the thing. Give me one second. Yeah, I'd rather watch that than that's real feminism in my opinion. This is bullshit.
Yeah, it's like fuck off with your toilets.
Here we go. Let me.
So this is in some ways often called the first piece of conceptual art.
این رکما می‌بینیم نمونه اینه بعضی مردم اولین کار هنر مفکوره‌ای میگن.
Does anyone know what it is?
شما کسی می‌فهمه چی است؟
I don't expect the ladies to know.
کامود است.
Exactly. An artist called Marcel Duchamp, who's very important in Western art, put this toilet in an art gallery about 100 years ago. It was a huge revolution.
It was a huge revolution.
Yeah, it's weird. I don't know.
I think these people. I think these people are like the people who make these ads and stuff, and who are like running this like, you know, these schemas towards this new developmental model. I'm not saying that they're not going to radically change things and use their power to cause a lot of like real change, because they do have a lot of power. But at the same time, I feel like they're quite delusional. I think they kind of remind me of like old senile people that just are like living in a different era or something.
Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to give like just to wrap up, I wanted to give some like I said, substantive examples of what these, like how these rankings actually get made and that sort of stuff. So I just want to start off by going, so these sorts of like rankings, they're done in a weird, like decentralized kind of way. Yeah. So if I go, let me just present the screen. There we go. That should be fine. Cool. So this is like Morningstar, which is you know, they do financial research, but basically they will either pay someone to do the assessment on the ESG rating, or they do it themselves. And you can search, like, you know, let's just put Tesla into here, and you can get their rating. So Tesla are medium risk for whatever reason, which is interesting. But I wanted to find like an actual specific example. So this
it's also interesting how it's risk. It's not their medium like good. Like
that was another thing. So one thing I wanted to point out as well is that although they talk about shareholders and stuff like that, like, and they try and expand it to include, you know, customers as well as investors and stuff. These sorts of rankings are only ever going to be used by institutional investors. That's someone working in an investment firm that wants some sort of heuristic to know whether it's a good investment or not, basically. Like it's not like workers of the world unite. Like it's not a egalitarian thing. Like which common person's mind to buy a Tesla is affected by this ESG rating?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like they're not going.
It just shows the disconnect between the stock market and the actual economy, because this is only going to affect the stock price, and it's only going to affect the institutional investors, so actual investors from investment firms who are buying that stock, basically.
It's like a greater schism, because wasn't that one of the main complaints after the financial crash, that it was like there's too big of a schism between like the financial like economy and the real economy, and then it's like they're just doubling down on this.
But what I just hate is the hypocrisy, because you've got all that talking and signaling about shareholder capitalism and expanding it to the greater number of people that these businesses actually affect, but this whole thing is only ever going to be used by investors.
Do you also think that there's also a kind of public relations side to it, where they're trying to kind of create or they're trying to it reminds me of the removing of the dislike bar on YouTube. Or in ratings for films, Rotten Tomatoes has like the open to everyone rating and like the expert film review rating. And there's been a few times where the film was kind of woke or something, and then the popular rating and the expert film review rating is like completely contradicting to each other. It's like 1% and 99%, like deliberately provocatively distinct from each other, and so it's like a disconnect reality. Like I kind of wonder, like, is that in a way what they're trying to do here with these companies? Are some companies going to try to like, for example, Elon Musk, he's kind of trying to be more of a countercultural figure and do things which are not popular among the elite and so on. I don't know if he probably is doing it in reality, but he's like the risk of a few rogue billionaires or something. Are they trying to sort of create a database, almost like a kind of like if you're like a sex offender and you like move into a neighborhood, you're on like a database or something, they're trying to create like a billionaire database. Like, this is a bad one. Yeah.
Well, maybe, I don't know. Like, I don't know if Tesla's not like considered like the wokest company, right? Well, but it's electric cars, right? So I guess the environmental impact's quite low. What's like a really woke company that I can search? Yeah.
A really woke company would be Apple, Google. I feel like tech companies are pretty woke.
Oh yeah, Google would be. Alphabet, sorry, forgot about that. Yes, that one's medium risk as well. So the thing is, right, I think the environmental stuff is like the biggest impact on this. Sorry, I know it's the biggest impact.
Well, Apple's got pretty low on there. Yeah,
I don't think the wokeness really factors into it as much as you might, as some people, commentators, are trying to make us think. So anyway, just to give a specific example, so this is the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board. So when I was saying it kind of works in a decentralized way, is that, okay, there is the general idea of ESG standards, but there isn't like one centralized authority that like assesses and gives a score to these things. These are all done by different firms and stuff. And so,
can you search one more company for me?
Yes, I can. Yes.
Search Gazprom.
Gazprom?
Is it Gazprom or Gazprom?
You're asking the wrong person.
It's the Russian.
Well, there we go.
Is it on there?
Okay. There you go.
Yeah. Oh, look at it. Severe risk. There we go.
It's over 40 plus, and it's over at 56. Is that? What's a Western like oil and gas producer?
Oh,
EP?
Shell? No, Shell? I think Shell don't do much anymore, do they? I think.
Interesting.
What?
Well, it's much lower than the Russian one.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, high risk, but not severe risk.
Severe.
Like 56, Jesus. And I'm pretty sure Gazprom is also a state-owned company as well, or like a state subsidy, or like, you know, private one of those private public companies.
Okay. Anyway, so there are also a bunch of companies under this SASPA, so Sustainability Accounting Standards Board stuff. So there's a bunch of companies under here. They do their ESG scores according to criteria on a specific sector. So they're all organized by so different sectors. Like for example, like the criteria that they use for apparel or like clothing is different from the criteria they use for like a gas producer, for example. So I have some examples here. So I've already downloaded. So we've got choose one and we'll look at it. So there's I've got alcoholic beverages. I've got apparels. That's clothing, footwear.
Oh, do alcoholic beverages.
Okay, let's do alcoholic beverages.
I want to see Bud Light.
Bud Light. I don't think it's specifically Bud Light, but this is just the general criteria that a company within that sector will be measured by. Sorry.
Okay.
So yes, cool. So they have. Yeah, so they're to give you examples of their sustainability things. They have things like the total energy consumed, percentage of the grid electricity they use, and the percentage of which is renewable. So they have a bunch of like quantitative. So these are like, you know, then they've got stuff for water management. So the number of water withdrawn. So like, I don't know, if Anheuser-Busch is like producing Bud Light and is really like as a detriment to like the water table or something, then that like marks them down basically. So those are some environmental ones. So to give an example of the social stuff, you've got responsible drinking and marketing, right? So this is like, you know, like when you see drinkaware.com added to the advertising. Total amount of monetary losses as a result of legal proceedings. And then, you know, packaging life cycle management, that's all to do with recycling. Ingredient sourcing. So this all kind of makes sense for alcoholic beverages, right? But what you'll notice, and again, this is where I just want to like flag this up, and this is why we do these deep dives and we don't just like listen to what Jordan Peterson and Adam Curry are saying, is that, yeah, okay, there's like the responsible drinking marketing that they're measured, the ESG is measured on, but there is no woke stuff on here.
Okay, yeah. Well, like, I think, I think you're onto something here, because I think that there is a maxing out of wokeness. Have you noticed that? Like it's kind of maxed out in the past few years, and I think that like I just don't know where they're going to go next with it.
Yeah, I've looked through a bunch of these. Like I've got one for food, like meat and poultry. I've got one for tobacco that I've looked at. They all have stuff like, you know, tobacco particularly has like responsible marketing and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah,
it doesn't mention like, oh, you know, this demographic group, or, you know, like we saw with all the UN stuff is, you know, it doesn't say anything about, you know, championing different genders and stuff like this. It doesn't say any of that stuff. So my theory is that I think that lots of whatever people call the woke stuff is definitely driven by like it's driven like by the people inside the company itself. Like the people who make the decisions for the marketing, all that sort of stuff is driven by those people there. I think that the ESG stuff is really driving the environmental stuff, but I don't think it's driving the woke stuff. That's my theory from what I've read, basically.
Yeah, like I think that would make sense, especially when I think that this seems more directed at geopolitics. Because you're talking about global trade, you're talking about where you get your resources from, where wokeness is, I think, more directed at domestic politics.
Yeah.
It's about, you know, how do you politically sabotage your enemies so they don't, it's kind of for two different things. And I also think it used to be that in the United States, at least, the Republicans were more the kind of foreign policy hawks, and the Democrats were much more lethal when it came to domestic policy. So I suppose this is kind of within that schism as well. Because as we were saying, Gazprom is like, the bad guy in this. So Gazprom are being cancelled. And Gazprom have been cancelled quite literally. And then you have to think about the banking sector there as well, because shutting down bank accounts and so on is a very effective power tool. So I wonder if this criteria would be linked to the financial system in that similar sense.
But yeah, that was kind of my hour-long roundabout way of saying that I don't think the ESG stuff is driving the woke stuff. I think it's driving the environmental stuff, and also driving, it's a mechanism by which the decentralized powers of like the UN and these sorts of things are going to use to control corporate bodies. But I think the woke stuff that all the right-wing pundits are complaining about is actually driven by individuals within like marketing departments, within HR departments. I don't think it's driven by these sort of ESG incentives. That was my hour-long way of saying that, basically.
Yeah, I think that's probably correct. Definitely. And maybe Jordan Peterson will have us on his podcast to explain this to him.
I don't think he will.
I'll send him a DM later on Twitter.
No, that's the wrong attitude to have. He will be lucky to have us.
Yeah.
He'll be lucky to be joining us one day on this wonderful broadcast.
He's too intense. I couldn't do an hour conversation with him. He's too intense. He's got such an earnest look, gazes into your soul.
I could take him. I could handle him.
You can handle it. Well, if we were doing it together, I might be able to handle it. But one-on-one, I think I'd freak.
I'll just show him some of my TikToks, some of my clips, and
I think he'd love us. I think he'd be like, "Well, thank you very much." I'm not going to do his voice, but you know what I mean. But yeah, definitely. But like, I think this is also the problem with like having, because I think psychologists are quite good for wokeness, because wokeness it's like Jordan Peterson really made his mark as a kind of like analyzer and criticizer of wokeness, because I think wokeness is such a psychological phenomena. It's such an expression of psychological kind of and psychopolitical tendencies, where I think this stuff is more, it's more global capital and geopolitical conflicts, and it's like there's obviously a psychological element to it with the whole catastrophism and eschatology and so on. But I don't think psychologists are going to be like the best analysts of this stuff that we're going through.
But I feel like I think that I'm coming to the position, doing like all this sort of research that we've been doing, is that I'm coming to the position that the woke stuff, whatever it's called, is all like culture war stuff, and it's ultimately a distraction.
I would agree in a qualified sense. I think that it's distraction, but it's also got these kind of tendencies, like post-human tendencies and stuff like that, which I think, and like an ostracization, which is, sort of materially consequential. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like it's an expression of ostracization, and that's a very old form of social control.
I didn't have to do that much research to find a bunch of standards for the ESG stuff and realize that, there's actually no like explicitly woke stuff in here. And lots of these pundits are just coming out and saying, ESG is literally just how woke a corporation is. It's just not. That's like literally not true. And the problem is someone with a really prominent voice, all this culture war stuff is just retarding their way of thinking. They don't even do like the basic bit of due diligence.
True. Like I suppose they're so wrapped in it from the past 5-6 years that it's hard for them to.
That's another issue with this being more entertainment than it is actually an intellectual thing. Is that, like you said, like some people have made their careers on critiquing whatever the woke is.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a shtick that it's probably quite tempting to keep going, right?
Yeah. Well, again, I do think it's had like very consequential. It has been significant and consequential for the way again, for like post-humanist technologies. If you look at the trans thing, it's kind of like it kind of lowers our moral boundaries around kind of surgical and chemical intervention into someone, and that could fit a kind of like genetic engineering and that kind of post-human. So like I think it did have like long-term ideological, like even if we go away from wokeness in the next few years, I do think it's had like consequential long-term effects on institutions and on the way we think and so on, just like ostracization does, because it purges the institutions out of
I don't disagree with anything you've said there. It's just specifically on this ESG stuff, I think that it's retarded people's like ability to look at it sanely.
Oh yeah, cool. I was just making a kind of historical point as well, because I think that historically we might be moving a little bit away from wokeness as the kind of go-to control mechanism towards something else. And I think that this stuff might be an insight into kind of where we're going. Especially because the whole security alert system thing too kind of fits into this as well, right? Because it's all about environmental risk and how we respond to it. And like, could you imagine a sort of system where they where it's more implemented towards citizens, like if you're not responding to the emergency text messages in the right way or something, you're somehow punished. I don't know how. Maybe I can't see like a full-on social credit score system happening in the West anytime soon, but some sort of mechanism of control and punishment on a more individual basis.
I mean, I think we've already seen that,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, with COVID, yeah.
People have gotten fines for, well, unless they're in, 10 Downing Street, but we don't talk about that.
Yeah, but it's hard to imagine how that would work, because it's like you didn't take the imaginary threat of a wildfire seriously, so therefore you're not getting into the cafe today or something. Like, it's hard to envision how this would work.
I don't know. Stranger things have happened in the last few years, so I'm going to keep my eyes open for that stuff.
Yeah.
That's kind of everything I had on the ESG and the alert system. I don't know if you've got anything to plug before we wrap up.
No, just follow me on subscribe on YouTube is probably the best thing to do. So it's RaymondKHessle, but you'll put the link in the description. So, but yeah, that was a good convo. I actually felt like I kind of learned something new, because because I think some of the other episodes I was kind of just repeating stuff that I already thought, but this is quite a good educational experience. And this stuff's important, I think, because I do think this is going to become more prominent in the next few years. So it's good to keep an eye on it.
Yeah, and like I said, I think the other stuff is a distraction, and I didn't have to do that much research to get to the bottom of this stuff, and so cool. Well, thanks for joining me.
Cheers.